He was invisible to everyone, until the billionaire's daughter collapsed in his arms, sobbing. What happened next shocked the entire city. This is the story of how the most overlooked man became the hero no one saw coming. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us that heroes come in the most unexpected forms. The Invisible Man. The fluorescent lights of Lexington Tower buzzed softly overhead, casting a sterile glow over the marble floors. It was past midnight, and the skyscraper stood silent, its usual bustle of executives and assistants long gone. Only the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional squeak of a shoe against polished tile broke the stillness. Marcus Boone moved through the emptiness like a shadow. At 42, he knew every inch of the building. The way the third-floor elevator stuck, if you didn't jiggle the handle just right, the loose tile near the south stairwell that threatened to trip anyone who wasn't paying attention. 10 years of mopping, wiping, and buffing had made him part of the architecture, as unnoticed as the vents pumping air through the corridors. Tonight, like every night, he worked methodically. Spray, wipe, repeat. The rhythmic motion was almost meditative. He hummed under his breath, an old Motown tune his father used to sing. The music kept him company, filling the hollow spaces where conversation might have been if anyone ever stopped to talk to him. Then a sound cut through the quiet, sharp, desperate. A sob. Marcus froze, his rag hovering mid-swipe over a smudge on the glass wall. The noise came again, rag and broken, echoing down the hallway. He turned just as a figure stumbled into the lobby. A woman, young, maybe late 20s. Her blonde hair was disheveled, her designer dress torn at the shoulder. Mascara streaked down her cheeks in dark rivers. She clutched her side like she was in pain, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Recognition flickered in Marcus's mind. Lena Whitmore, Charles Whitmore's daughter. The billionaire's name was plastered on half the buildings in Chicago, and his family was local royalty. Lena's face had been splashed across society pages for years. Charity galas, tech launches, always poised, always perfect. But the woman in front of him was anything but perfect. She was terrified, their eyes locked. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Lena's knees gave out. Marcus lunged, dropping his rag and catching her just before she hit the floor. She was lighter than he expected, trembling like a bird in his arms. Up close, he could see the wild panic in her eyes, the way her fingers dug into his sleeves like he was the only solid thing in a world spinning out of control. "Help me," she whispered, the words barely audible. Marcus didn't hesitate. He pulled her upright, scanning the lobby. No one else was here. No security, no late-night workers. Just him and a billionaire's daughter, who looked like she'd run through hell to get here. "What happened?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Lena shook her head, her breath hitching. "They're coming." A cold prickle ran down Marcus's spine. "Who's coming?" Before she could answer, the distant growl of an engine cut through the night. Headlights swept across the lobby's glass entrance, illuminating the empty reception desk. The potted plants, the two of them standing there like figures in a spotlight. A black SUV idled at the curb, its windows tinted dark. Marcus didn't wait to see who stepped out. He grabbed Lena's arm and pulled her toward the custodial closet, his pulse hammering in his throat. The door clicked shut behind them, plunging them into near darkness. The only light came from a small crack under the door, slicing a thin line across the mops and buckets. Lena slumped against the wall, her chest rising and falling too fast. Marcus fumbled for the first aid kit he kept on the shelf, his hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Talk to me," he said, tearing open an antiseptic wipe. "Who's after you?" Lena swallowed hard, her voice cracking. "My fiancé." Marcus paused. Troy Vexler. Even he knew the name. The golden boy of Chicago finance, always in the papers for his charity work, his perfect smile. Lena let out a bitter laugh. "He's not what people think." She pressed a hand to her side, wincing. "I found files, transactions, offshore accounts. He's been stealing from my father for years. Millions." Marcus's grip tightened on the first aid kit. "You confronted him." She nodded. "He said no one would believe me. that I was just a spoiled heiress who didn't understand business. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Then he threatened me. The pieces clicked together. The torn dress, the panic, the SUV outside. Marcus had spent a lifetime being ignored, but he knew danger when he saw it. A loud bang echoed from the lobby. Someone was inside the building. Lena's eyes widened. Marcus held up a hand, listening. Heavy footsteps moved across the marble, slow and deliberate. Then a voice, sharp with authority. Security sweep. Anyone here? Marcus's jaw clenched. That wasn't building security. They didn't sound like that. He met Lena's gaze. We need to move. Now. She nodded, her fear giving way to something harder. Determination. Marcus cracked the door open just enough to peer out. The lobby was empty, but the footsteps were getting closer. He grabbed Lena's hand. Stay close, he murmured, and don't look back. Then they ran. Secrets in the shadows. The service elevator doors slid shut just as the footsteps rounded the corner. Marcus stabbed the button for the basement, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. Lena stood frozen beside him, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The elevator jerked downward, the cables groaning in protest. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was a mechanical hum of the elevator descending. Then Lena let out a shuddering exhale and sank against the wall, her legs giving out beneath her. Marcus caught her before she hit the floor, easing her onto an overturned bucket. You're hurt, he said, his voice low. She shook her head, but the way she clutched her ribs told a different story. It's nothing. Marcus didn't buy it. He'd seen enough fights in his old neighborhood to recognize someone hiding pain. Without another word, he grabbed the first aid kit from the shelf in the corner. Every service elevator had one, a rule he'd insisted on after a porter sliced his hand open on broken glass last year. Let me see, he said, kneeling in front of her. Lena hesitated, then slowly lifted the torn fabric of her dress. A dark bruise was already spreading across her side, the skin mottled purple and red. Marcus hissed through his teeth. That's not nothing. She flinched as he pressed an antiseptic wipe to the worst of it. Troy's driver, she muttered. He grabbed me when I tried to run. Marcus's hand stilled. The driver did this? Lena nodded, her eyes glistening. Troy just watched. Something hot and furious coiled in Marcus's chest. He forced it down. Right now, he needed to focus. The elevator dinged as it reached the basement. The maintenance level, a maze of pipes, storage rooms, and the old boiler system that kept the tower running. Few people came down here, which made it the perfect place to hide. The doors opened to darkness. Marcus flipped the light switch, revealing rows of industrial shelving stacked with cleaning supplies and spare parts. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped steadily into a drain. This way, he said, offering Lena his arm. She took it, wincing as she stood. They moved slowly, Marcus leading her past the humming HVAC units toward the back of the basement. There, tucked behind a stack of paint cans, was a door marked electrical, authorized personnel only. Marcus pulled a key from his ring and unlocked it. Inside was a small, windowless room filled with circuit breakers and a single folding chair. A makeshift safe house he'd set up years ago after a particularly bad winter storm trapped him in the building overnight. He kept bottled water and protein bars here, even an old blanket. Lena blinked at the sparse setup. You have a panic room? More like a break room, Marcus said, guiding her to the chair. Security never comes down here. We should be safe for a while. He handed her a water bottle, which she accepted with trembling hands. She drank greedily, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. For the first time, Marcus noticed how young she looked. Not the polished socialite from magazine covers, but a scared kitten way over her head. Tell me everything, he said, leaning against the wall. Start from the beginning. Lena took a shaky breath. I was going through Troy's study. He'd been acting strange for weeks. Secret phone calls, sudden business trips. I thought maybe he was cheating. She laughed bitterly. I almost wish he had been. She explained how she found a hidden compartment in his desk, filled with documents, bank transfers, shell companies, Millions of dollars funneled out of her father's flagship investment fund. At first I thought it was a mistake, she said. But the dates matched up with board meetings where Troy pushed for new partnerships. He was stealing Marcus, and he'd been doing it for years. Marcus whistled low under his breath. Charles Whitmore was one of the richest men in the country. If Troy was skimming from him, this wasn't just embezzlement. It was a betrayal that could topple empires. What happened when you confronted him? Lena's grip tightened around the water bottle. I was stupid. I thought if I had proof, he'd confess. Maybe return the money. Her voice cracked. He just smiled and said no one would believe me, that my father trusted him more than his own daughter. The memory twisted her face into something raw and wounded. Marcus didn't need her say the rest. He could imagine Troy's smug dismissal, the way men like that always assumed their power made them untouchable. Then he called his driver, Lena whispered, said I needed to cool off somewhere private. That's when I ran. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. He'd heard enough stories about people who disappeared after crossing the wrong wealthy man. Before he could respond, a noise echoed through the basement. The distant screech of the service elevator doors opening. Lena went rigid. Marcus held up a hand, listening. Heavy footsteps moved across the concrete floor, slow and deliberate. Then a voice, deep and authoritative. Check every room. Marcus's blood turned to ice. That wasn't building security. Security didn't sound like that. He lunged for the door, locking it just as the footsteps grew closer. Lena's eyes were wide with terror. They found us, she breathed. Marcus pressed his ear to the door. The footsteps stopped outside. For one heart-stopping second, silence. Then, a fist pounded on the metal. Open up. Maintenance check. Marcus didn't move. He knew that trick. The pounding came again, harder this time. Last chance. Lena grabbed Marcus's arm, her nails digging into his skin. He could feel her shaking. Then, a miracle, the shrill ring of a cell phone. The footsteps retreated slightly as whoever was outside answered. Yeah. A pause. You're sure? Another pause, then a frustrated growl. Fine. We'll check the garage. The footsteps faded away. Marcus waited a full minute before daring to exhale. They're gone, he murmured. For now. Lena slumped forward, her head in her hands. They're not going to stop looking. Marcus studied her, the bruises, the torn dress, the stubborn set of her jaw beneath the fear. He thought about all the times he'd been overlooked, dismissed as just a janitor. Maybe that's why he understood her so well. Then we don't let them find us, he said. Lena looked up, her eyes searching his. Why are you helping me? Marcus didn't hesitate. Because you're the only one who's seen me all night. Outside, the tower loomed above them, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. Somewhere up there, Troy Vexel was probably already spinning his lies. But down here in the dark, two invisible people had become something dangerous. Witnesses. And Marcus knew one thing for certain. The rich would do anything to keep their secrets. He reached for his phone. We need proof, and I know where to start looking. The janitor's gambit. The dim glow of Marcus's phone illuminated the cramped electrical room as he scrolled through the building's security portal. His janitorial login shouldn't have had access, but 10 years in the same building taught a man things, like which supervisors use password 123 for their credentials. Lena hovered over his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. Can you pull up the parking garage cameras? Marcus tapped the screen, already on it. The feed, loaded in grainy black and white. There, near the VIP section, stood two men in dark suits, one on his phone, the other scanning the area like a predator. Marcus didn't need sound to know they were discussing their next move. Lena's fingers dug into his shoulder. That's him. The one on the left is Troy's head of security. Marcus zoomed in. The man had the build of a former linebacker, his jacket straining across broad shoulders. Not someone you wanted chasing you through a dark basement. They'll check every exit, Marcus muttered. He switched to the lobby feed. Two more suits stood by the front desk, flashing badges at the night guard. The guard nodded, pointing toward the elevators. Lena's voice trembled. They've got the police involved. Marcus's jaw tightened. Of course they did. Men like Troy didn't play fair. They owned the game. A metallic clang echoed through the pipes above them. Both froze. Someone was in the maintenance corridors. Marcus killed the phone's display, plunging them back into darkness. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the staticky crackle of a radio. Negative on sublevel 2. Moving to mechanical, Lena's hand found Marcus's in the dark, her grip vice-tight. He gave a quick squeeze, steady, before reaching for the only weapon in reach, a heavy-duty wrench from the tool rack. The footsteps stopped outside their door. A beam of light sliced under the threshold. Marcus held his breath. 1 second. 2. Then, miraculously, the radio crackled again. All units, possible sighting on 38th floor, moved to intercept. The light disappeared. The footsteps retreated. Marcus waited a full 30 seconds before exhaling. They took the bait. Lena blinked. Bait! A ghost of a smile touched Marcus's lips. He reopened his phone, pulling up a different camera feed. There, clear as day, was a figure in a hoodie darting past the 38th floor executive suites, exactly where Marcus had remotely triggered a motion sensor alarm 5 minutes earlier. Old maintenance trick, he said. Give them something shiny to chase. Lena stared at him with something like, "Aw, you're terrifyingly good at this." Marcus pocketed the wrench. We bought maybe 15 minutes. Here's the play. Troy's penthouse is on 60. That's where he keeps his real files. Not digital. Paper? How could you possibly know that? Because rich guys think paper burns, Marcus said, already moving toward the door. And burning leaves no subpoena trail. He cracked the door open, scanning the corridor. Clear. Lena hesitated. Even if we get up there, his biometric locks won't matter. Marcus pulled a key card from his wallet. Not his usual access pass. This one bore the Lexington Tower logo in faded gold. Building manager's master key. Retired last year. Forgot to deactivate it. For the first time since the elevator, Lena's face lit with real hope. They moved like shadows through the service stairwell, Marcus counting floors under his breath. At the 58th, he stopped them short, peering through the door's wire-reinforced window. Problem, he muttered. A guard stood post outside Troy's private elevator, a hulking figure with a visible earpiece. No sneaking past that. Lena chewed her lip. We could. Marcus was already typing on his phone. 3 seconds later, every fire alarm in the tower erupted in unison. The guard startled, pressing a hand to his earpiece. A voice squawked something about mechanical fault and evacuation protocol. With obvious reluctance, the man stepped into the elevator and disappeared downward. Lena gaped. You can do that? Marcus pocketed his phone. Building's got a test mode for fire drills. Helpful when you need to clear a floor. They slipped into the hallway just as the sprinklers kicked on, a light drizzle soaking their shoulders. Troy's penthouse doors loomed ahead, sleek black and undoubtedly alarmed. Marcus swiped the master key. The system beeped red. Access denied. Lena's hope dimmed. So much for her. Marcus was already unscrewing the wall panel beside the door. Secondary system, he said, fingers flying over the wiring inside. All these smart locks? They've got a dumb backup. A spark. A click. The door slid open. Troy's penthouse sprawled before them, all cold marble and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Somewhere below, sirens wailed as the building evacuated. Marcus made straight for the study. No time to admire the view. The desk was exactly as Lena described, modern, expensive, and hiding its secrets well. Marcus ran his hands along the underside until his fingers caught on a subtle groove. A hidden compartment slid open. Bingo! Files. Dozens of them. Offshore account numbers. Shell company ledgers. And Marcus's breath caught. A folder labeled contingencies with Lena's name on it. Lena paled as she flipped it open. Inside were photos. Her leaving her gym, her favorite cafe, even her apartment balcony. All time-stamped within the last month. He was watching me, she whispered. Before I even knew. Marcus's stomach turned. This wasn't just embezzlement. It was a roadmap to something darker. A noise cut through the silence, the distant ding of an arriving elevator. They weren't alone anymore. Marcus shoved the files into his janitorial jacket. Time to go. Lena didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the study security monitor, where the feed showed the elevator doors opening on the penthouse foyer. Troy Vexler stepped out, flanked by 2 guards, and he was holding a gun. Marcus yanked Lena behind the study door, just as Troy's voice rang out through the penthouse. "Lena? Sweetheart, I know you're here." The tone was pleasant, almost amused, like this was all some fun game. Marcus pressed the files into Lena's hands and grabbed the wrench again. His voice was barely a breath. "When I say run, you run." Somewhere in the penthouse, a glass shattered. Troy was getting closer. Marcus tightened his grip on the wrench. The game had just gotten real. The Billionaire's revelation. The study door creaked as Troy stepped closer, his polished Oxfords clicking against the marble floor. Marcus held his breath, the wrench heavy in his hand. Lena stood frozen beside him. The damning files clutched her chest like a shield. "Come on out, Lena," Troy called, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "We both know how this ends." A shadow stretched across the study's threshold. Marcus counted the footsteps. 3 more, and Troy would see them. He made his move. With a sharp exhale, Marcus kicked the door with all his strength. It slammed into Troy, sending him stumbling back into his guards. Chaos erupted. "Run!" Marcus barked, shoving Lena toward the penthouse's emergency stairwell. She didn't hesitate. Troy recovered fast, his face twisting in fury. "Grab her," he snarled at the guards. One lunge, but Marcus swung the wrench in a wide arc. It connected with a sickening crack against a man's forearm. The guard howled, clutching his arm. The second guard pulled a taser. Marcus barely dodged the first strike, the prong sparking against the wall behind him. He retaliated with a brutal shove, sending the guard crashing into a glass display case. Shards rained down as Marcus bolted after Lena. The stairwell was a blur of concrete and adrenaline. Lena was already 2 flights down, her breath ragged but her stride unbroken. Marcus caught up just as the door above burst open behind them. "They're heading for the garage." Troy's voice echoed down the stairwell. Marcus cursed. They couldn't lead him straight to the exits. "Change of plan," he panted, grabbing Lena's wrist and yanking her through a service door onto the 52nd floor. The offices here were empty, the evacuation still in full swing. Lena's eyes darted around. "Where are we?" "Trust me." Marcus pulled her into a janitor's closet, slamming the door shut just as footsteps pounded past outside. For a moment, the only sound was their labored breathing. Then Lena let out a choke laugh. "Another closet?" Marcus wiped sweat from his brow. Worked the first time. But they couldn't hide forever. Marcus pulled out his phone, pulling up the building's security feed again. The garage was swarming with Troy's men. The lobby wasn't safe either. Then his eyes landed on a different camera, the rooftop helipad. "I've got an idea," he said slowly. "But you're not going to like it." 20 minutes later, the rooftop wind whipped at Lena's hair as she clutched the files tighter. Below them, the city glittered like a fallen constellation. "This is insane," she shouted over the roar of the approaching helicopter. Marcus grinned. "Insane gets you out alive." The chopper was Charles Whitmore's private transport. Marcus had triggered an emergency recall protocol by hacking the building system, another perk of knowing the maintenance overrides. The pilot's confused face appeared as the helicopter touched down. "Miss Whitmore? What the hell?" "No time." Lena yanked open the door, shoving Marcus in behind her. "Go. Now." As the helicopter lifted off, the rooftop door burst open. Troy stood there, his suit disheveled, his expression pure rage. For one endless second, he and Lena locked eyes through the window. Then the chopper banked sharply, and he was gone. The Whitmore estate was a fortress of steel and glass, nestled in the hills outside the city. Charles Whitmore stood in his study, his face unreadable as Lena spilled the entire story. The file spread across his desk. When she finished, silence hung thick in the air. Then Charles turned to Marcus. You did all this? Marcus shifted on his feet. Just gave her way out, sir. Charles studied him. The stained janitor's uniform, the wrench still clutched in one hand, the quiet steadiness in his eyes. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. Troy always said you were just a janitor, he mused. Funny, it took a janitor to bring him down. Within hours, the wheels of justice were in motion. Troy's accounts were frozen. The SEC launched an investigation. The Chicago Tribune ran the headline. Billionaire heiress exposes fiancé's fraud with help from unlikely hero. And Marcus? Charles offered him a job that night, not as a janitor, but as head of corporate security. You've got instincts I can't buy, the billionaire said. Marcus hesitated. Then he shook his head. Appreciate it, sir, but I've got a better idea. 3 months later, Lena Whitmore stood at the podium of her new foundation, Second Chances, dedicated to fair wages and advancement for service workers. The cameras flashed as she gestured to the man beside her. My friend Marcus taught me that heroes don't always wear capes, she said, smiling. Sometimes they carry mops. Marcus, now sporting a crisp suit and a bemused expression, shook his head as the crowd applauded. Some things never change. He still hated the spotlight. But as he caught Lena's eye, he figured some changes weren't so bad. Ever felt invisible? Remember, even the smallest actions can change everything. Hit like if this story inspired you. Subscribe for more real-life heroes. And tell us in the comments, when did you feel seen?